Well, it's good to see you here this evening. I appreciate those of you who are visiting with us and want you to know you're always welcome here. We are going to be studying in Ecclesiastes tonight. We've been studying through this book on our PM sermon slot, and we've made our way through to chapter 6, and we've touched a little bit on chapter 7 already, so we're barely going to touch on chapter 7, and we're going to try to move all the way into chapter 9 tonight. So I'm looking forward to our study together and hope you are too. This is a really great book, just to constantly be reminding ourselves of the different struggles that we face in life and then to think about and consider how all of those struggles have been addressed. God has shown us the answers as we come into the New Testament and we see Jesus reigning as we just sang. So wonderful text for us to think about and look at. Tonight, we're going to look at a theme that he has really throughout chapters 8 and 9, but he touches and prepares us for it in chapter 7, and that is the theme of the injustices of life, how life doesn't always go the way that we want it to, or the way that we think it should. From a very young age, we've had a sense of that. I've noticed it in my house as my children have been upset about not getting what they want. And this statement comes out of their mouth, that's not fair. We tend to say that. I myself, I'm sure, have said it a lot as a child especially. We have this overwhelming sense of injustices that are being done against us in life. And in some cases, it's very true. There are injustices that we're dealing with in life. Life is not fair, as we're going to see Solomon's going to point out to us over and over again. But as we consider how we're supposed to respond to this truth, Solomon gives us some advice, and we're going to look at that as well. And then whenever we come to the New Testament, it kind of completely twists everything as far as injustice and justice goes. So I'm looking forward to studying this with you. As I said, we're going to kind of introduce this by looking at chapter 7 a little bit, just a couple verses in chapter 7. So if you're there in Ecclesiastes 7, look at verses 3 and 4. This is very important words, I think, for all of us to consider all the time. In verse 3 it says, "Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face the heart is made glad. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth." As you read these verses, these are verses that I would commonly read at just about every funeral that I preach at or get the opportunity to talk at. Solomon is telling us essentially it's better to go to a funeral than it is to go to a party. It's better to be at a house of mourning than it is to be a house of mirth, a house of rejoicing and joy and excitement. And that's a very odd thing for Solomon to say. But he explains it like this. He says, "By sadness of face, the heart is made glad." As we have somber expressions on our faces, as we are saddened by the truth that the person we love is no longer with us, at the same time, our heart is given new life. It's rejuvenated. It's given a shock into life so that it can become glad again, happy about the fact that that's not true of us. The person that we're seeing being laid to rest is not us. That we have a chance to continue to live, even though this person no longer has that opportunity. He goes on and he says, "The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning." This is an opportunity for us to sober up, for us to think about life with wisdom, to understand that this life is precious, that it's temporary, and that we're given it for a very short amount of time, and that we need to make the best use of what we have left to live. It's sad that things are temporary. Solomon's touched on that throughout this book and said that's the way God made it. So it is what it is. But as we consider that, we should have some sense of excitement, some sense of joy, knowing that we get to still live. We're alive today. We're not promised tomorrow, but we're alive today. And it may be that we live tomorrow, and it may be that we live for the next 10 or 20 or 30 years, who knows. And we should be excited about that and consider this an opportunity for us to make the most of the life that we have. Now, as I said, this is setting us up for chapters 8 and 9. You have this mindset in yourself that you're just grateful to be here. I'm just grateful to be alive. Melvin said that in Bible class this morning. He wakes up every morning and he's just glad he gets to do this again. It's a great attitude to have. But as you have that attitude, then you're ready to face what Solomon says in chapters 8 and 9, which is a lot of depressing stuff, unfortunately. If you go to chapter 8, you'll notice he talks about kings, and submitting to kings is always a better idea than trying to rebel against them. As you come into verse 5, it says, "Whoever keeps a commandment will know no evil thing, and the wise heart will know the proper time and the just way. For there is a time and a way for everything, although man's trouble lies heavy on him. For he does not know what is to be, for who can tell him how it will be? No man has power to retain the spirit or power over the day of death. There is no discharge from war, nor will wickedness deliver those who are given to it. All these I observed, while applying my heart to all that is done under the sun, when man had power over man to his hurt." He brings up this picture of there's a time for everything, but the truth is we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what the future holds. I know a lot of people try to tell the future. They try to say, the nation's crashing, everything's crashing, we're going to the Great Depression, it's already started, and they tell us all this financial advice because they know what's going to happen in the future, and the truth is we don't know anything about the future. All these predictions are just made up, and the truth is we have no idea how it's all going to turn out. We don't have power to fix things or to change things, and we don't even know if we're going to get to live tomorrow. And all of that could kind of feel unjust, that we have to live in a time when everything is so uncertain. Why can't I know what's going to happen in the future? Why can't I go ahead and do everything I need to do to prepare my life to be perfect for the rest of my life? Why do I have to deal with so much uncertainty in life? Why is it possible for life to throw me a curveball that completely messes with everything that I had going for me? And so Solomon kind of brings up this to prepare us and help us understand that's the way it is. There's no escaping this. We don't have the ability to overcome this. Life is uncertain. And in fact, as he continues, he points out that there's a lot of wickedness throughout the world, and there's no stopping that either. And sometimes the wicked get things that the righteous should get. And sometimes the righteous get things that the wicked should get. Look at verse 10. He says, "Then I saw the wicked buried. They used to go in and out of the holy place, and were praised in the city where they had done such things. This also is vanity. Because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil. Though a sinner does evil 100 times and prolongs his life, yet I know that it will be well with those who fear God, because they fear before him. But it will not be well with the wicked. Neither will he prolong his days like a shadow, because he does not fear before God." Now, here's Solomon going to the house of mourning. And in this particular instance, it's a wicked man. And this wicked man has gone into the holy places, and he was praised by people. He was much loved as he went through life. He was prosperous. And all of this seems so unjust, doesn't it? That he would be able to do this wickedness and get away with it. And he says that there's this thing that he sees in life. Whenever someone does wickedness and nothing happens to them that's bad, then everybody thinks, oh, well, it's okay to do wickedness. And everybody just jumps in, and that person just goes and does more wickedness to see how much they can get away with. And so he says, this is the state of life, that there's this tendency to think, well, if God's not going to judge me for being wicked, then I'll just be more wicked and I'll do more evil. And eventually you get to this state where this person who's wicked, who hasn't been judged by God, thinks that they're okay enough to go and to worship God in the holy place. And everybody else is so excited to get to do wickedness with him that they're praising him and they're joining in. And he says, this is evil. He says, it's not going to go well for this man. It can't. It's not possible. It's too unjust. He says he will not prolong his days like a shadow, because he does not fear before God. See how Solomon is hanging on to this idea of there will be a just retribution that happens for those who pursue wickedness. He doesn't know how. It doesn't seem like it's happening in this case. It seems like sentence has been prolonged. It's not happened yet, but he feels like this just doesn't seem right. Something's going to happen in the future. There's got to be some right, making of all of this, some justice. And you go to verse 14. He says, there is a vanity that takes place on earth, that there are righteous people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the wicked. And there are wicked people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the righteous. I say that this also is a vanity. You see, injustice is everywhere. The wicked person is prospering like the righteous person should be. The righteous person is suffering like the wicked person should be. It's just not right. Life's not fair. And he says this is all just vanity. As he looks at life, he says this is just vanity. Things aren't orderly. Things don't happen the way that they're supposed to happen. And it gets even worse whenever you go into chapter 9. Look at chapter 9, verse 1. He says, but all this I laid to heart, examining it all, how the righteous and the wise and their deeds are in the hand of God. Whether it is love or hate, man does not know. Both are before him. It is the same for all, since the same event happens to the righteous and the wicked, to the good and the evil, to the clean and the unclean, to him who sacrifices and him who does not sacrifice. As the good one is, so is the sinner, and he who swears is as he who shuns an oath. There's no difference. They're all going to die. And in the end, they're all going to suffer the same fate. As he looks at life under the sun, what he sees is, here's a righteous person, and there's his grave. Here's a wicked person, and there's his grave. There's no difference. Everything seems like it turns out the same in the end. And you can see that being just a great injustice in the mind of Solomon. And he goes further in chapter 9 and talks about how this is a great evil. This is not right. Something's wrong here. And as he says all of this, notice he said in verse 1, their deeds are in the hand of God. He's kind of recognizing God's going to handle this, I guess. But I don't really understand how. In our minds, as we're looking at all this, both die. The righteous and the wicked. And so, how are you going to deal with that kind of depressing truth? How are you going to deal with it? You're going to join with the side of the wicked and pursue whatever kind of life gives you the most joy and satisfaction? Is that the answer? Or are you like Solomon and are you kind of like, well, surely God's going to make this right. Surely God's going to provide some justice in the world. And everything's really in his hands. And we don't really know what he's going to do or how he's going to do it. But surely he's going to make everything the way it ought to be. Well, you go and you look at other texts here. You see Solomon tries to give advice. Understanding that life is unjust. Understanding that the righteous sometimes suffer. And the wicked sometimes prosper. Solomon has some advice for those who are trying to be righteous. He tells them, enjoy your life. Enjoy it as much as you can while you can. Look at chapter 8, verse 15. It says, and I commend joy, for man has nothing better under the sun but to eat and drink and be joyful, for this will go with him in his toil through the days of his life that God has given him under the sun. Go down to chapter 9, verse 7. Go, eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already approved what you do. Let your garments always be white. Let no oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love, all the days of your vain life that he has given you under the sun, because that is your portion in life and in your toil at which you toil under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might, for there is no work or thought, or knowledge, or wisdom in Sheol, to which you are going. You see how Solomon has this kind of a conclusion that the righteous should just enjoy the life that they have to the best of their ability. Because in the end, they're going to end up just like the wicked. They should just enjoy it as much as they can. Now, he doesn't promote wickedness. He doesn't promote immorality. But he does promote enjoying the blessings that God's given them. because that's the best you can do. Because you don't really know if all your righteousness is going to lead you to a wonderful, joyful, blissful ending to your life. It could be full of suffering. He's seen that with the righteous, that they have, the result is like the wicked. They have suffering. So as long as you can, enjoy the prosperity God has given you. And this is the way Solomon views things. Now, understanding this, Solomon, if he is the writer of Ecclesiastes, is telling us, live your best life now. Live for right now. And if you know the history of Solomon, as you go and you study Kings, you learn that Solomon became an idolater in his life. And we don't know how Solomon's life ended, but as you look at his response to the injustices that he sees, and the response is, give yourself joy and enjoy life to the fullest. We see that is good, and we should do that. And we talked a little bit about that last time with money. It's good to enjoy the things God has given you and to praise Him for the wonderful blessings that He's given you. We can see how that could go a little too far, can't we? But that's his advice. Don't let injustice keep you from enjoying the blessings that God has given you. Have a positive outlook, a positive mindset, and a contentment and a joy about the blessings that you do have in life, instead of spending all your time worrying about the things that you don't have or the things that are wrong. You go to chapter 8 in verse 16. He says, this is his advice: when I applied my heart to know wisdom and to see the business that is done on earth, how neither day nor night do one's eyes see sleep, then I saw all the work of God, that man cannot find out the work that is done under the sun. However much man may toil in seeking, he will not find it out. Even though a wise man claims to know, he cannot find it out. As you deal with the injustices in life, Solomon tells you, enjoy all the things that you can. That's good advice. And he tells you, stop trying to understand it all. It doesn't make sense. It'll never make sense. Why is there injustice all throughout the world? Well, no one knows. And no one will ever know. In all our seeking and all our toiling, we will never fully understand how God is working intricately in all the lives of the people who are wicked and all the lives of the people who are righteous. We can't see it as best we try. There's no way we'll be able to tell or understand what is going on behind the scenes. You go to chapter 9, verse 11. He gives this advice. Again I saw that under the sun the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to those with knowledge, but time and chance happen to all of them. For man does not know his time. Like fish that are taken in an evil net, and like birds that are caught in a snare, so the children of man are snared at an evil time, when it suddenly falls upon them. Then he says this: I have also seen this under the sun, this example of wisdom under the sun, and it seemed great to me. There was a little city with a few men in it, and a great king came against it and besieged it, building great siege works against it. But there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city. Yet no one remembered that poor man. But I say to you that wisdom is better than might, though the poor man's wisdom is despised and his words are not heard. Notice, first of all, he just lists all of these unjust things that happen in life. The race is not to the swift. The battle's not to the strong. He sees that there's all these people who should have all these things, and they don't. It doesn't make any sense. It's unjust. And then he brings this wise man up who's poor, and he says he's despised. What do we learn from that? Well, Solomon's trying to give us the understanding you need to tame your expectations a little bit. Don't expect everything to work out for you in life. Sometimes it will, but sometimes you're going to do everything right, and it's still not going to work the way you want it to. And you can't change that. And then he gives this example of this wise man who has wisdom. And he even uses his wisdom to save a whole city. But nobody pays any attention to him. And yet at the end, Solomon says it's better for us to be wise, though. Even though it didn't really result in praise and glory and honor for the poor man because he was still hated, it's still better to be wise. So he kind of, at the end of this, gives the advice not to give up on what's good and what's wise just because life is so uncertain and full of injustices. Just because you may do everything right and still end up with the wrong result doesn't mean you shouldn't try. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do your best. And this is the way Solomon views life under the sun. How does that make you feel? Is that exciting? Is this like a great, exciting message? No. This is like depressing stuff. I mean, it's like crushing to all of those of us who have these childhood dreams of, utopia and everything getting better and being wonderful. But we've all been faced with this reality as we've grown up and we've seen that things don't work out the way they're supposed to. And people we love suffer, even though they shouldn't. That's the best. The best of us end up dying too soon or something along those lines ends up happening. So that's life. That's the truth. That's the reality that Solomon's pointing out to us. And his advice is pretty good. To enjoy the blessings you have while you have them, to stop, fretting about, you don't understand this, so what? Stop expecting everything to go perfect. That's pretty good advice. And still continue to pursue the good things. But whenever we come into the New Testament, we see that Jesus knows all of this. Jesus understands all of this. He understands that life is not just, life is not fair. He understands that life is temporary and that there's all this uncertainty in life. But as he comes in, he faces all of that injustice and he deals with it. And he explains it to us. He explains what true justice really is and helps us to kind of paint a different picture of justice than what we might think. Paint a different picture of goodness and righteousness than we might think. Really, all of Solomon's statements throughout Ecclesiastes are based on his perception of what is righteous and what is good and what is wicked and what is evil. And whenever Jesus comes onto the scene, he paints a totally different picture of goodness and righteousness. Whenever they call him good teacher, he says, there's no one good but God. And he paints that kind of picture. In John 8, you have a picture of a woman who's brought before Jesus who's been caught in the act of adultery. And he tells them, whoever's without sin, cast the first stone. You see how he's pointing out these who appear righteous and think that they're righteous are really wicked. There's none righteous. And we come into Romans, we see Paul very clearly lay that out for us. Not a single one of us is righteous. And so if anything good happens to us at all, it's not because we're righteous, because we're not. So our whole perception is altered when Jesus comes onto the scene. Whenever he helps us understand that we're all deserving of punishment and suffering and loss. We're not deserving of the wonderful blessings that God gives us over and over again. But Jesus was deserving of all that. Jesus was without sin. And as he goes through life, he endures greater injustices than we have ever experienced in our lives. Jesus is condemned as a blasphemer when he didn't do anything wrong. He's spit on, he's mocked, he's beaten, he's slashed, and he's crucified. If anybody had a right to be upset and depressed about the injustices of the world that we live in, it was Jesus. He went through it all. And he came out the other side. And he went through it all peacefully, and he went through it all maintaining his righteousness, trusting that God would deliver the judgment that's needed, what Solomon just hinted at and didn't fully understand. Jesus foretold, and Jesus described to us that he would have the ability to make the final judgment when this life is over. That he would be able to separate the righteous from the wicked. and that he would allow those who are righteous to enter into eternal life and have eternal joy in a land that is just and good and full of the people who are truly following after God and doing the ways of God. And he would separate those who are wicked and pursuing their own ways and refusing to submit to God, and he would punish them and cast them away from those who are righteous. So Jesus comes in as the ultimate judge, and he explains to us how God is intending to work all of this mess out. And in the end, he will get it all right. So as we come to the funerals and as we come to all of these situations where we see all this injustice and all this sadness and wish that we could change the way things are, we have a reassurance in Jesus that one day God will address all of that. And he will make all of the bad things right. So that helps us, I hope, as we deal with injustices. What Solomon says is helpful, but understanding the truth about Jesus is even more helpful. Solomon tells us, if you're upset about the injustices, go to the house of mourning. Remember that you're blessed to have a life on earth. You're blessed to not be in the casket. And enjoy what you can enjoy for the rest of your life, because God has given it to you to be enjoyed, and you are still living so you can enjoy what God has given you to enjoy. And the truth is that Jesus brings in is we're really doing better than we deserve. Life is much better than it should be if we got what we deserved. So we should be very joyful about the blessings that God has given us. We should be rejoicing over all the many gifts that he showers upon us, and we should have complete contentment in those wonderful things. And at the end of the day, we need to be continually pursuing wisdom, and we need to look at Jesus who sees all the suffering and injustices that he goes through as an opportunity to serve God and glorify his name. And that's exactly what we need to do. We need to follow in his footsteps, as 1 Peter 3 points out. It's a gracious thing whenever we suffer to do good and to help other people understand the truth. We deal with their injustices that they cast on us with patience and long-suffering and love. And at the end of the day, we glorify God by living that way. So I don't know what kind of injustices you're dealing with in your life. There's a number of them that we are going to face in our lives that we're going to have to struggle with. But I hope that Solomon's perspective helps you to think differently about those injustices, to think that there's more to life than just those injustices, and that we can focus on those and enjoy life still. And I hope that what we learn about Jesus as we understand who he is and what he's done sets the example for us, to not let the injustices get us down, but to overcome those and glorify God anyway in the midst of great injustice. If you're here tonight and you have not accepted the grace that God has offered to all of us, that is so sad. And God has provided for you a free gift that you don't deserve, that I don't deserve, that is available to anybody who is willing to submit themselves to God. If you're willing to do that, if you're willing to give your heart to him and start living for him, he is willing to forgive you of all of your sins and to make you a child of his. And we, as his children, are desiring to help you in any way that we can. If you'll let us know, please come as we stand and as we sing.